Are you sure you think independently? Let's check. Have you ever hated a person you've never met? Believed in something because everyone knows it? Heard the phrase, "the world is going to hell"? If at least one yes, your consciousness has already been manipulated. And this is not an accident. Today I will tell you how to recognize manipulation, not become a victim of the information war, and most importantly, regain control over your brain. Wars of the 21st century are not only missiles and tanks. It is also a war for your consciousness. The task of information warfare is not to conquer countries, but to conquer brains. So that people do what is needed and believe in what they are fed. The main weapon is not automatic rifles, but headlines. Sometimes it happens gradually, imperceptibly, and sometimes it's mass psychosis. For example, in 1518, the dancing plague began in Strasbourg. People literally danced to death because they believed they had to dance. Historians believe it was caused by mass hysteria, amplified by religious beliefs and social tension. In those times, people believed it was a punishment from God, of a curse that made them dance without stopping. The authorities, instead of calming people down, further fueled the situation by allocating special squares and orchestras which only intensified the crowd effect. This is an example of how fear and belief in external influence can lead to uncontrolled behavior. Now look at the modern internet. Headlines: "The world is going to hell." This event will change the course of history forever. Run to the store now. Tomorrow shelves will be completely empty. No food, no water. People are dancing again. Only instead of dancing, they post, write comments, hate, fear. And this is not accidental. It's a part of the game. And now imagine you're reading a news story. The government has decided to raise taxes by 20%. Or banks will start massively blocking accounts. What do you feel? Fear? Outrage? And now the question: is there any evidence? Is there a primary source? Or is it just a sensational headline that makes you react emotionally? This is a classic example of how information turns into a tool of influence. For example, in 2008 in the United States, during the global financial crisis, panic headlines began to spread massively. Banks are collapsing, urgently withdraw your money. People rush to withdraw all their savings, which on the contrary only worsened the situation. A domino effect arose. Due to panic, banks collapsed, which might not have happened if not for the mass hysteria. This situation spread to other countries, especially Iceland, Ireland, and Greece, where banks and the economy suffered a serious blow. This is a classic example of how fear and misinformation can trigger real problems. People who constantly encountered such messages began to believe them, even without real evidence. This created panic and divided society, which was beneficial to certain groups. This is how information influence works: through repetition, emotions, especially fear. Manipulations work in such a way that you don't even notice how you're being controlled. They can look like harmless news, the opinions of so-called authoritative experts, or simply repeated statements on social networks. But they all aim for one thing: for change your behavior, emotions, and beliefs. Let's consider the main techniques used to make you believe in lies. If 1,000 people shout "it's true," you will start thinking so too. This is a phenomenon where a person in a crowd begins to behave differently than when alone, even if it's absurd. Research shows that when the majority supports an idea, the brain automatically starts to lean towards it, even without evidence. The human brain is evolutionarily programmed to follow the majority. In primitive society, this ensured survival. If everyone was fleeing danger, it meant you had to run too, without even understanding what was happening. This phenomenon is called social proof, when we trust something simply because others do. The problem is that in the modern information environment, this mechanism is used for manipulation. Example: information that a popular product is dangerous is massively spread on social networks. People start boycotting it. The company suffers losses, although it later turns out to be a fake. Another example is stock markets. When the majority panics and starts selling shares, even those who understand that there are no reason for a crisis also start selling to avoid losing money. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, an artificially created crisis. Emotional contagion is the transfer of emotions from one person to another or a group. You are shocked, made to feel fear, anger. You stop thinking critically. Why? Our brain is evolutionarily wired to react to danger instantly. This allowed our ancestors to quickly flee from predators or avoid threats. But in the modern information space, this mechanism is used for manipulation. When we are shocked, scared, or angered, the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional reactions, is activated. As a result, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thinking, is suppressed, and the person begins to act impulsively. That's why the media and manipulators like to incite fear. It makes people react immediately, not critically analyze the situation. An example of emotional contagion. One person started panicking on a plane, and suddenly everyone around them also become nervous. Someone in company laughs, others also start laughing without even understanding the joke. A news anchor speaks in a tragic voice, viewers automatically feel anxiety. On July 7, 2005, a series of terrorist attacks occurred in the London Underground and buses. A few days later, on July 9, a subway train made a sharp stop due to a technical malfunction. Passengers who had not yet recovered from the terrorist attacks began to panic and run out of the carriages. Although there was no threat, people screamed, smashed doors, and tried to escape, infecting each other with fear. Thus, one frightened passenger caused a domino effect, and the entire group fell into panic. In 2006, at a school in Mexico, 600 students were infected with an anxious state. Several children complained of shortness of breath, fear, and tremors after a teacher's words about devilish influence. Over several days, the symptoms spread to hundreds of students, although no physical causes were found. This is a case of mass emotional contagion due to religious fear. Repeat a lie 100 times and it becomes the truth. This method is called the illusory truth effect. The more often you hear information, the truer it seems. Our brain likes familiar statements and starts to perceive them as fact, even if they have no scientific or logic basis. Psychologically, this is explained by the fact that the brain operates on the principle of cognitive economy. Checking every fact is energy-consuming, so it prefers familiar information. If a statement is heard many times, it is perceived as safe and reliable because if it were not true, it would have already been refuted. In the 1930s, Nazi propaganda actively used this method. They repeated lies about certain ethnic groups for decades, and even those who initially did not believe these statements gradually began to doubt. This ended in genocide. A similar method is used today when politicians or the media endlessly repeat certain theses, forcing people to believe them even if there is no evidence. Another example. A politician constantly repeats that his opponent is corrupt, although there is no evidence. After a few months, people start to believe it's true, simply because they have heard it many times. In 2016, during the US election campaign, a conspiracy theory called Pizzagate was widely spread. It claimed that Hillary Clinton and other high-ranking officials were involved in a secret child trafficking network, allegedly coordinated through the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in Washington, D.C. Despite the complete lack of evidence, this theory spread widely through social networks and far-right websites. It all ended with an armed man believed these rumors, breaking into pizzeria to save the children he thought were being held there. He opened fire, but no one was injured. After his arrest, the man admitted that he had no evidence and acted based on information he read online. The FBI and independent investigations confirmed that the allegations were completely fabricated. Thus, repeated repetition of false information can lead to real dangerous consequences. In 2014, a British newspaper mistakenly named a teacher, Brandon Greenwood, as a pedophile. Although there was no evidence, it spread on social networks. The man was attacked online. Friends turned away and his family received threats. He committed suicide, unable to withstand the bullying. This is an example of how online slander destroys lives, even if the accusations are false. False dilemma. The human brain naturally simplifies complex phenomena to make decisions faster. This is a cognitive mechanism that helped our ancestors survive by dividing the world into dangerous and safe. But in the modern world, such a simplified way of thinking makes us vulnerable to manipulation. A false dilemma forces us to choose between two extremes, although there are actually many more options. Have you ever heard this phrase too? If you don't like your job, it means you're lazy and unmotivated. Bosses often say this when a person complains about poor conditions, low pay, or burnout. Seriously? Or maybe the conditions just don't suit me. Maybe I'm burned out, or I want to do something else but haven't found my thing yet. It's not either or. There are a lot of nuances here. But it's beneficial for companies if you only think in these two options. Either work or full capacity, or you're nobody. If you criticize the government, it means you're against the country altogether. Have you heard that? This is a pure example of a false dilemma, because it's possible to support the country but criticize bad government decisions, respect the law but disagree with certain politicians, want changes for the better and not just be silent and accept anything as it is. But people are often forced to choose only two options. Either you are for or you are an enemy. This manipulation works perfectly because it makes people afraid to express their opinion. After all, who wants to be a traitor? During the Cold War, propaganda from both sides actively used the false dilemma. The United States promoted either you support democracy or you are a communist and an enemy of freedom, while USSR proclaimed either you support socialism or you are a traitor to the people. People were forced to believe that a neutral or alternative position simply did not exist. Because of this, they began to see the world in black and white categories, which only intensified tension and confrontation. This is a manipulation that forces people to perceive a situation in only two options, black or white, good or evil. In reality, the choice is almost always more complex, and there are dozens of options, but they are deliberately not considered. Manipulation of headlines. The human brain is programmed to react to threats. This is an evolutionary mechanism that helped our ancestors survive. We instinctively pay attention to scary or shocking messages because the brain interprets them as potential danger. That's why headlines that evoke fear, shock, or outrage work so well. They make us click, read, and react. In the media, this mechanism is used to attract attention. Publications and blogs compete for your time. So they exaggerate, take facts out of context, and present information in a way that evokes the maximum emotional response. Example, headline: Scientists warn, black hole could destroy Earth. The article explains that this is only a hypothetical scenario in billions of years, but fear has already arisen. People share this information, comment, and panic grows, although there is not real threat. Another example, headlines in the style of "Shock, the government plans to ban," or "You won't believe what will happen to the economy." Opening the article, the reader often learns that the news is not as scary as it seemed, but the brain has already triggered an emotional reaction. And this makes people believe that the headline was true. This is a classic mechanism of information manipulation. It sounds scary. You open it, and there is nothing like that. But the emotion has already been triggered. Now for the most important part, how to understand that foreign thoughts are being imposed on you. Manipulation works in such a way that a person doesn't even notice how their opinion changes. So stop and ask yourself 3 questions. First, is this a fact or an emotion? Second, can I verify this? Third, who benefits from me thinking this way? If there isn't a clear answer to at least one question, you are at risk. For example, if news is presented without sources, only with emotional statements like "everyone is shocked" or "this was hidden from you," this is a signal of possible manipulation. If information is presented from only one side, and the opposing view is either ridiculed or not mentioned at all, this is another sign of influence. Manipulation only works when a person is unaware that they are being controlled. Here are some proven methods to help you remain critical and independent. Firstly, filter information. Not everything you read is true. Remove sources that emotionally destabilize you. Secondly, switch focus. If a new story makes you panic, ask, what can I realistically do about this? If nothing, don't waste your energy. Thirdly, don't let fear control you. Fear is the main tool of manipulation. The more you're scared, the easier it is to make you act impulsively. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, panic news about a complete shortage of goods began to spread, which provoked mass purchases of toilet paper and food. The authorities did not announce a shortage, but people created it themselves out of fear. Fear is the main tool of manipulation. If you are constantly told, everything is lost, tomorrow is a catastrophe will happen, ask yourself, is this a fact, or are they trying to make me afraid? Next, don't fall for black and white thinking. Our brain is naturally inclined to simplify reality. This is a cognitive mechanism that helps us make decisions quickly. But in complex issues, this can lead to false conclusions and manipulations. The world is not divided into good and bad, because reality is always more complex. Example, political campaigns often use rhetoric like, if you don't support us, it means you're against the country. But the reality is much more complex. You can agree with some decisions while criticizing others. The same goes for the media. The same news can be presented differently, and only by analyzing various sources you can see the true picture. What to do? Pay attention to nuances and alternative viewpoints. Ask yourself, are they deliberately trying to force you to take someone's side without fully understanding the situation? Manipulators like to divide the world into us and them. If you are being forced to hate someone, think about who benefits from this. And finally, think for yourself. Have your own opinion, even if it doesn't coincide with the crowd. Today they want to control your brain. Some politicians, media outlets, corporations and bloggers are playing the game for your attention. But now you have a shield. You know how they attack you. You know how to defend yourself. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe and share this information with a friend. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.